from the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee. We'll be questioning the candidates on various topics of interest to the voting public.
And the candidates for Leon County Judge, Seat 4, are from left to right, Robert Churchill and LaShawn Riggans. And a reminder for those watching us on social media, please hit the share button and help all of your friends see today's discussion live. For those of you at home, here's how these forums are going to work. We're going to rotate which candidate gets to answer first. We'll have a lot of questions, so we're going to ask the candidates, please keep your answers to about 60 seconds, sometimes shorter for follow-ups. We'll let you know. We will keep time, and we have a bell which will ding when your time is up, so you don't have to come to a dead stop when you hear that bell. But I would say when you hear the bell, go ahead and finish your sentence, and we'll move on. Barry?
If you're watching live on Facebook and you have a question for the candidates, go ahead and type them in the comments, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Time is very limited, so you can improve your chances of your question being asked if you keep it brief and polite. Make a question applicable to all candidates. Any questions before we start?
None?
No? Then let's jump into the first question.
All right, our first question is, if elected, how will you transition from advocating for the rights of your clients to advocating for impartial justice? You have 1 minute each, and we will start with Mr. Churchill.
Thank you, and thank you all for this forum and the opportunity to speak to you and to the voters. If elected and I become a judge, part of the job of an advocate as an attorney on behalf of clients is to understand your client's perspective, to understand the rules and laws that apply to the case at hand, and to understand and anticipate the position that your adversary or your opponent will be taking. So this is an adversarial system that we're working within, where a decider, a judge or jury, ultimately decides the case. And part of being a competent attorney is understanding both sides. When you act as a judge, you're not taking one of the sides, you're weighing and measuring the sides of argument. And that's how I would transition to it, is listening more than I talk, hearing the arguments, and making a ruling and a decision.
Ms. Riggans.
Yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you guys again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the voters and the work that you all do in the community, advising and informing the voters. So thank you so much for that. For me, I don't think that there really will be a transition. The type of law that I practice currently is government law, where the government is my client. And essentially, as a judge, you don't have a client. Your job is to weigh the evidence and make a decision based on the facts that are before you, applying the rule of law as applicable. And so as a judge, you follow the law and you make that decision. There's no one to advocate for except for justice itself.
Thank you. Barry?
Among other things, county judges hear misdemeanors, crimes punishable by no more than a year in jail, and civil disputes involving $50,000 or less. To what extent have you practiced law relevant to the caseload you would undertake as a county judge? We'll start out with Ms. Riggans, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. I am both, at some point in my career, been a prosecutor and a civil lawyer. I've been a trial lawyer most of my career. So my career began with me being an assistant state attorney, and I began my career in county court. So I've handled all of the types of cases that come before the court in a criminal sense, from DUIs to petty thefts to misdemeanor domestic violence battery, and all of the other trespass cases. So I have experience handling those cases. Currently, as a government lawyer and the former deputy county attorney, a lot of times we would have disputes that come before us where citizens have made a complaint, or there has been a dispute between one of our tenants, or a plethora of different types of cases where the amount of damages is $50,000 or less, and I've dealt with those cases as well.
Mr.
Thank
Cunningham.
you. My experience
Churchill,
has been predominantly in county court and in running a small business that caters to civil lawsuits against consumers and small businesses in county court here in Leon County and around the state. I have, prior to opening that office and in the early years of my career when I first opened my office, I did everything that came along. I did family law, I did appeals, I did administrative law, until I focused my energy and practice on civil litigation, which is where I spend most of my time now. My exposure to criminal law as it occurs in county court has mostly to do with the office space that I share with a DUI lawyer now. I consult with him on his cases. The evidence code that is used in my cases is the same as is used in criminal law, but my depth of experience and my knowledge is in civil litigation.
All right, thank you very much. Next question. Florida's Code of Judicial Conduct says a judge is encouraged to engage in activities to improve the law, the legal system, and the administration of justice. If you're elected, in what outside activities would you engage, if any? Mr. Churchill, you'll go first for 1 minute.
Thank you. What I would probably end up doing is doing more of the same work that I'm doing now and volunteering in the community and in working engaging with activities on a pro bono basis. Now, most of what the pro bono work that I do now is in dispensing legal advice, but there's plenty of work that can be done in the community, visiting shut-ins, for example, Meals on Wheels that I've done before in my time here in Tallahassee that I would continue to engage in. That has nothing to do with legal work. It's just getting involved. And I will likely continue to do that.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Riggans.
Yes. I am currently involved in several voluntary bar associations where we mentor college students, both that are in law school and those that have aspirations to follow the law at a later stage that are in undergraduate. So I currently mentor. I am also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, and we do a lot of volunteer work in the community. Likewise, I'm a pastor with my church and over the outreach ministry, so I'm constantly in the community working with homeless, working with veterans is my passion. So I spend a lot of time when I am not practicing law, being involved in the things that are going on in the community. I volunteer with Teen Court and Classroom to Courtroom program at Pace Center for Girls with Frank R. Nims Middle School, so I plan on continuing to do those things.
All right, thank you very much. Suzanne.
All right. Surveys have shown that close to 90% of Leon County residents believe inequity exists in our justice system. How will you address that perception? Ms. Riggans, you may go first for 1 minute.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. Surveys have shown that close to 90% of Leon County residents believe inequity exists in our justice system. How will you address that perception?
I think you address that perception by being fair, by being equitable. As you start as a judge and as people get familiar with you and you make fair and impartial rulings and you give the parties the opportunity to be heard, I think that word travels within the community. People start to discuss that, saying, Judge Riggans, when you go before her, even though you don't get the outcome you would have liked, you feel that you were heard, you feel that she applied the law and that she was fair in her decision. And I think as that word spreads, it starts to build trust again within the community, that there are still judges on the bench that handle cases on a case-by-case basis, that they listen, that they hear the parties, that they apply the law, and they apply it fairly.
Mr. Churchill, how would you address that perception?
I agree with my friend, Ms. Riggans, that the first job of any judge is to be fair. The problem is, and to answer your question, is that every judge would say that they are being fair, and there is still a disconnect if there are 90% of people who say that there are inequities involved in this system. The job of the county court specifically, and really of any judge, is to explain well what is going on. And the county court, that's acutely important, and that's because most people's interaction with the court system, the general public, is going to be in county court. So this court really serves, in essence, as an ambassador for the court system to the public. And it's the job of the judge to relay, here's what's going on, here's why I have ruled as I have, to explain it, to make sure everybody, whether they agree with it or not, I have to rule in somebody's favor, and this is why I'm doing it. That requires courtesy, dignity, and respect for everybody involved, and it makes people see at least the basis for the ruling, whether they like it or not.
Thank you.
In our local jail, the population of black males is more than double that of white males. What can you do, if elected, to reduce the rate of incarceration for black males, particularly for those under the age of 40? You each have 1 minute, and we'll start with Mr. Churchill.
Thank you. It's a concern and a problem, basically, just looking at the numbers and populations of people who are affected by criminality, basically what has occurred and the way that they are charged and the way that they are treated in the court system creates this population imbalance to which you refer. What to do about it is a complicated question for a judge, and that's because judges don't play a role in charging those accused of crimes. But there are programs that the judge can certainly encourage the parties to explore, to look into, plea agreements that a judge can or cannot accept or reject, encouraging parties to look into other avenues to avoid a cycle of criminality that creates a feedback loop and gets worse. That's, I think, the role of the judge.
Ms. Riggans.
Yes. Unfortunately, it is the law enforcement officers that make the arrest, and they have the discretion to arrest or not to make that arrest. And then the state attorney's office has the discretion to bring the charges or not to bring the charges. Once a judge gets involved, the arrest has already happened. And at that point, our job is to listen to the law and evidence that's presented before us and to, make a ruling based on the evidence and the facts that are before us. However, I do believe that the judge can have a role in educating law enforcement officers and members of the state attorney's office and the public defender's office to work together collaboratively to exercise some of the discretion that they have to refer, defendants to diversion programs and to do different types of programs that would prevent them from getting before the court in the first place.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Next question. The term judicial activism often refers to judges ruling on issues based on their policy views rather than strictly on the law. Generally speaking, what is your view of judicial activism? And that is, do you agree or disagree with it, and why? I'm going to ask Ms. Riggans to answer first in a minute.
Thank you. I am not a judicial activist. I'm a common sense approach type person. I do not believe as a judge you should be putting your own views into making decisions in a case. So regardless of my political views, they have no place in the courtroom. And so from that standpoint, I do not agree with judicial activism in where you are letting your politics or your beliefs or your morals influence the decision of the law. The law is the law, and it should be applied as such.
All right. And Mr. Churchill, same question.
Judicial activism, as I would define it, is essentially a judge knowing and seeing what the law is as written and deciding that it doesn't really apply here, in my opinion, and I'm going to do something else. That is a problem because in that situation, you have a judge essentially exercising a veto over the policy-making prerogative of the legislature who wrote the statute, and that's not the role of a judge. So this system works best when judicial viewpoint and judicial application of the law is uniform so that attorneys and parties before the court understand what the law is and how the judge will apply it. And That, in my view, is the role of the judiciary, is to apply the law. There's plenty of work to do, plenty to interpret and apply without usurping the role of the policymaker, which is the legislature. That would be judicial activism, and that's what I will avoid.
So I just want to drive this point just a little bit further, so I'm going to ask a follow-up, and we'll say that you have 30 seconds each to respond to this. How would you handle a case where you strongly disagree with the law or the precedent but are required to follow it?
Is that for me?
Well, we started with Ms. Riggans, so we'll start with Ms. Riggans again on the follow-up.
I would follow the law. Me disagreeing with it is irrelevant. The law is on the books, and it is not my job as the judge to ignore it. It is to follow it. In your legal career, there may be a lot of things that you disagree with. There may be a lot of laws that you disagree with, but until they're changed by the legislature, it is the law of the land, and that's your job and your responsibility to follow it as such.
All right, Mr. Churchill.
I agree. The law as written says this. I disagree with it, but the law as written is going to be applied to your case. And the judge, and some judges do this, go out of their way to explain, this is what the law says. This is why this ruling is coming down this way. Don't go as far as saying whether they agree with it or not, as they almost certainly should not, and I would not do that in that situation. But you have to offer explanation. The bottom line is, if I disagree with the law as it is written, but the law says this is the outcome that is required in the situation, then that's what you do. You follow the law.
All right, thank you both. Suzanne.
What are the qualities of a good judge, and how do you embody those qualities? You have 1 minute each, and we will start with Mr. Churchill.
The qualities that any judge needs to have are courtesy, respect, and adherence to the law, and a maintenance of dignity for everybody that comes before the court. One judge that I talked to recently when I was asking this question told me something that I like best, and that is that a judge needs to listen well, listen more than they talk. And a judge needs to explain well. A judge owes explanation to those people who are affected by the judge's rulings. So as long as you're listening more than you talk and you manage to explain well, you're doing a large part of the necessary elements of what a judge does, and you need to have the temperament that goes with it.
Thank you. Ms. Riggans?
Yes, thank you. I believe that judges should be knowledgeable. I think they should have a high moral character. I think they should have empathy. I think they should be articulate and capable of explaining their rulings to those that are before them. I believe that they have to have an understanding of the community in which they serve, and that they have to govern themselves with integrity and hold themselves out to be of a type of character where you know when you appear before that judge that they're honest, that they're fair, that they have a high moral character, and that they care about the parties that before them. Even though you may not necessarily be to rule in someone's favor, it does not hurt to show empathy and respect, and that is what I feel a judge should do.
Thank you. Barry?
The 12-member Public Safety Coordinating Council, which includes one county judge, is tasked with monitoring the population in the Leon County Detention Facility, identifying alternatives to incarceration, and increasing coordination among criminal justice system agencies. What would you hope to accomplish if you became a member of the council? We'll start out with Ms. Riggans, please.
Yes, I would hope to be able to continue the work that they are doing. I mean, they do good work. And I was at a forum just a couple of days ago where they were talking about restorative justice and different programs that are available, one, to reduce recidivism, which should be our goal, and others to, prevent people from getting in the criminal justice system in the first place. So I think the work is to continue to explore those programs, to educate people about those programs, and take better use of the programs that are already available.
Thank you, Ms. Riggans. Mr. Churchill.
Thank you. If I were on the committee, what I would be doing is doing everything I can to emphasize and to assure that the committee in what it's doing is reaching out to affected communities. There is a reason that some communities are being affected more with a cycle of criminality that we are trying to avoid. And as I've been listening to people during this campaign, what I'm hearing is, look, what we have to do is set up a system where the low-hanging fruit for whoever is affected by this is not falling into the criminal justice system. There are other options out there. That is not necessarily the role of a judge, but if on this committee, that's exactly what that committee sounds to me like what it's for, is to set up something and to encourage the utilization of other programs to avoid falling into a perception that criminality is profitable.
Thank you, Mr. Churchill. And as a follow-up, we'll start with you, Mr. Churchill, and we'd like you to limit your answer to 30 seconds. How would you improve coordination among our local criminal justice system agencies?
Have meetings, encourage talks, and in those talks, I mean, we can talk and talk and talk without solving problems, but we have to get concrete measures in place on steps to be taken.
Thank you. Ms. Riggans?
Yes. I think I would like to have a forum of community partners. One of the things that we do with the county is when we have stakeholders that have answers to problems that we ourselves can't do, we get them all in a room and we have dialogue, and then we come out with solutions and a way of implementing those solutions. And I would do the same thing in that scenario.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. My next question is, how will you balance fairness and impartiality with empathy when hearing cases? And I understand I built an assumption into that question, which is maybe you don't believe you should have empathy when you're hearing cases. So if you disagree with the premise of the question, let me know. But again, the question, how will you balance fairness and impartiality with empathy when hearing cases? Mr. Churchill, you can go first, 1 minute.
I expect that I would do it very much the way that I do this now. I run a small business that is focused on working for consumers and small businesses in county court cases, and many people come into my office feeling very strongly about what the law should do for them. This is what the law ought to, I ought to be allowed to do this. And a big part of my job is saying, well, the law actually says this, and it doesn't quite line up with your view of it. And you need to be empathetic and hear people and tell them that you understand it, and then explain the law as it is applied to their situation. And sometimes it doesn't work out the way that they expected. That's part of a lawyer's job, and it's also part of a judge's job in this context.
All right, Ms. Riggans.
I absolutely believe that there is room for empathy in being a judge. I think you absolutely have to have it. The balance is you still have to follow the law, but I believe in following the law that there's room to have compassion. There's room to understand, the parties that are before you, and to make sure that you're articulating when you're making your rulings the rationale behind them. I think a lot of the problem is that people don't feel like they're heard. They, leave the courtroom and they feel like, the judge didn't pay attention. They didn't even, look at the evidence that I presented before them. There's, no way they should have been able to rule that way if they just heard me. And so I think that is a big piece of it. You follow the law, but within there's definitely room to have compassion. There's definitely room to, have a sentence that is crafted in a way that's fair and equitable and takes into consideration, what brought the parties before you in the first place.
All right, thank you both. Suzanne.
So how will you ensure that all parties in your courtroom are treated with respect and fairness, regardless of their background or financial needs? We will start with Ms. Riggans for 1 minute.
That's the easy one. You just do it. I came from very humble means. We were not rich by any stretch of the imagination. My mom worked extremely hard, for everything. If the lights got cut off, she made a game out of it like we were camping. So I get it. I understand, and I understand what it feels like to feel like you're not seen. And I think in order to make people feel like that they're not seen is to see them, to listen to what they're saying, to hear them, and to just be fair. I mean, that's not a hard thing to do. You just do it.
Mr. Churchill.
I think the tone of courtesy and civility is something that comes from the judge. There's a placard that many judges around our state have that sits in front of the bench or on their conference room table in their chambers that says, "Courtesy and civility, nothing less will be accepted." And that comes from the judge, and it's a message to everybody who enters the room. This is what I expect of your conduct while you are here. And then it's up to the judge to enforce that. Now, in county court, what you also deal with, as in addition to lawyers arguing their cases, is unrepresented people who may be challenged at times to carry the mantle of courtesy and civility and respect. And that is up to the judge to set the tone and to refuse to accept denigration of the parties between one another, et cetera. It's up to the judge.
Thank you very much. Barry?
Yes. What steps have you taken to identify and address your own implicit bias that, if you are elected, could affect your decision-making? I will start out with Ms. Riggans, please.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Yeah, I didn't quite understand it. I'm sorry.
What steps have you taken to identify and address your own implicit biases that, if you are elected, could affect your decision-making?
To be honest, I don't think that I have any biases that would impact my decision making. We all have things that we believe in. We have things that we disagree with, but as a judge, you have a very unique role. You're not taking sides in a case. You're not advocating for a client. Your job is to sit there, listen attentively, weigh the evidence that is presented, and then based on the law and the evidence, make a decision. And your personal beliefs, your personal politics have no place in that. I think that's what erodes the community's trust in the system. And our job is to help build that trust. And so there's just no room for it. And so therefore, it doesn't come into play in my thought process.
Thank you. Mr. Churchill?
I think part of addressing one's implicit biases is first to acknowledge that one may have implicit biases. And that's a big step for a lot of people. A lot of people have a very hard time acknowledging that they could have any bias at all. And yet there's a lack of confidence, as we've talked about here, in the justice that is meted out by the court system. It matters that the court system is communicating and the judges on the court are communicating that they take this issue seriously. We cannot tolerate implicit biases among our ranks, and we're doing this about it. So for me, what I have done is I've asked everybody who will talk to me about this what they see as problems in our system and what they think I, as a judge, can do about it. And I've gotten some very informed answers that I will be utilizing there. There's training to undertake, and I expect I will be taking that training as we go forward, if elected.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Next question. What is the role of a county judge, if any, in addressing broader social issues, such as mental health or drug addiction or any kind of addiction that can come up in court cases? Mr. Churchill, we're going to start with you this time for 1 minute.
These issues, basically issues that affect vulnerable populations, mental health, drugs and addiction, have special programs that are designed as divergent programs here in our circuit to avoid a cycle of criminality for those struggling with homelessness. There's a veterans court. There's a drug court and addiction program, and mental health to try to avoid the situation of a repeated cycle of what becomes escalating criminality. And a judge can basically encourage the use of those measures, but a judge cannot initiate them. That's the issue. When you're on the bench and the case comes before you, you have to explore whether those things have been looked at, but then you have to rule on the case.
Okay. Ms. Riggans.
Thank you. I'm going to have to piggyback on what Mr. Churchill has said. There are those courts in place. There's a mental health court, there's a veterans court, there's a drug court, and those referrals normally come from the state attorney's office. But a judge, when a case comes before them, if they are hearing things, or as the case is progressing and and you discover that maybe that person before you may have some mental health issues, or that the reason why they're before you may because there is an addiction or drug problem. I mean, you definitely can make inquiries, have we looked at these other alternatives to them being here? I think as you get cases in and you get files in and you look at them, those are conversations that you should probably be having with the prosecutor and the defender when you're having your case management conferences and things of that nature. Have we looked at these other avenues instead of going down this particular path?
Okay, I'm going to ask a follow-up then, and maybe try to get a little bit more clarity on that last question, and that is, certainly a judge can take into effect factors in a case, that a defendant has addiction problems, that a defendant has mental health issues. I guess my question really got more at the question of, there have been these specialty courts that have been created across the country to handle specialty issues, and there has been some, to put not too fine a point on it, some conservative pushback against those specialty courts over the years. The question really is, do you believe that these specialty courts should exist, or should they not? Ms. Riggans, I'll ask you to answer first.
Absolutely. I am 100% a proponent of the specialty courts, because when someone has some mental health issues, the court and the criminal justice system really isn't equipped to deal with that. You need to have a court that has doctors and psychologists and things of that nature, which is a part of mental health court, and the person gets the treatment that they need. Likewise, in drug court, you're treating the symptom and the causation of why it occurred in the first place. Yes,
Okay.
they're needed.
Thank you, Mr. Churchill.
My understanding of the pushback you're talking about is a pushback on the uses of the mechanisms of these specialty courts. That is the breadth by which they're used and applied, as opposed to their existence. And I have no problem at all with the existence of the courts. There may be questions about who is qualified and who should get the measure of remedy that is afforded in those courts and who should not, but their existence is not in question for me.
Okay, thank you very much. I actually piggybacked on a question that Suzanne was supposed to ask. So I'm going to turn it over directly to Barry for the next question.
Thank you. And we'll start with Mr. Churchill with this question, and you'll have 1 minute. Which Florida court decision in any Florida court do you think has most affected the lives of Floridians?
Mr. Churchill, why don't you take that first?
I will take that first. Gideon versus Wainwright is a case that was decided in Bay County Court, a case that ultimately resulted in a U.S. Supreme Court decision saying that everyone has a right to a public defender. The defendant in that case was incarcerated because he could not afford a lawyer, and lawyers at that time were not appointed for everybody accused of a crime. He appealed from the jail cell to the U.S. Supreme Court and established nationwide precedent. That was a Florida case, and it has profoundly affected the way that justice is applied in our criminal courts in Florida and nationwide.
Thank you. Ms. Riggans?
That is a tough one, because there are so many laws out there that I do feel impact the daily lives of, Florida residents. And even when we look at the county ordinances, I mean, they are laws that impact your daily your daily lives, be it, what you can do with your dog, if your dog has to be on a leash, if, how loud you can have your music. There are so many laws out there that it's hard for me to single out one because all of them impact you in one way or another. But I happen to think that the local laws have greater impact on your day-to-day life than, the higher ranking, cases and things of that nature that may have a big umbrella over you. I happen to think that the local laws have a greater impact on the day-to-day lives of Floridians.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The next question was mine, but Suzanne, do
thank
you want to go ahead and take
Sure,
that
I'll
from me?
steal that from you.
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Judicial ethics are critical in maintaining public trust. Please describe a situation in which you faced an ethical dilemma and explain how you resolved it. 1 minute for each of you. We'll start with Ms. Riggans.
Thank you. I happen to sit on the Florida Bar Professional Ethics Committee, and this is my second term, so ethics is extremely important to me. At one point, as a prosecutor, a case was presented where there was some questionable evidence and if it should be considered and if the case should be dismissed or not. And it was a hard case because, it was enough to go forward if you took everything at face value. And it took some diving into and kind of going a little further beyond. And at the end of the day, I did what I felt was right, and it was supported, and I was very thankful for that. But as a lawyer, you're faced with ethical decisions a lot as a litigation attorney. There's things that your client wants you to do to get the job done, and sometimes it's very challenging to tell them no, but you have to.
Mr. Churchill.
My setting boundaries on clients is a big part of what many attorneys practicing in litigation do. So I've had a consultation with a client in the last 5 months probably, where the client told me what was going on, explained to me what the view of the other party was, explained to me why they were right in their mind, and then set out their goals. And their goals were, one, to prevail on their view of the contract that we had, and two, quote, to make him suffer. And at that point, I had to say to the prospective client, look, I'm not here to make anyone suffer. And I understand what you may have been put through, and trying to exercise as much empathy as I can for this client in this moment. The problem is that skews the goals of what I'm doing. I can make a good deal happen here for you, where we work things out and your interests are protected, and then you may not be satisfied that this person has suffered enough. It's not an attorney's job to make someone suffer. You have to set boundaries on clients routinely.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. In a little bit, we'll go to closing arguments, but before that, we're going to do what I used to call a lightning round. But we have a little extra time, so I'll call it the short answer round. I believe these answers are going to be untimed, but I would say to be as concise as you can. And so I will ask, you'll be sharing the ballot this November with what some consider to be the most important election in history. Can you say, who will you be voting for at the top of the ballot for President of the United States? Ms. Riggans.
I cannot.
Mr. Churchill.
I cannot.
All right. We're going to have a lot more time at the end of this. Mr. Churchill, what's your single most prized endorsement for this position?
My most prized endorsement for this position is those of the attorneys and professionals on my committee. The Committee of Responsible Persons for my campaign are 39 lawyers and legal professionals from around Leon County who I have crossed paths with over 20 years of practicing law, who believe enough in me to have endorsed me.
All right, Ms. Riggans.
I don't have a prized endorsement. I have been endorsed by lawyers that I've worked with, but more so just members of the community that have come across me, that I've worked with, that I've volunteered with, organizations that I've worked with that have supported me, pastors that, I've worked with. So the prize thing about me with the endorsements is they're coming from every sector of the community. So it's not just one, it's well-rounded, and that makes me feel like I'm on the right path and that there are enough of a cross-section of people in this community that supports me.
If I held your name to the fire and I told you had to name one name, could you do it?
No.
Mr. Churchill, could you do it?
No.
As you know, this year is the bicentennial of Tallahassee and Leon County. Tell me one lawyer or judge in Leon County, past or present, that you most admire. Ms. Riggans, go ahead.
Oh my goodness, that is an on-the-spot question, is it not? I can't give you just one.
Give me several.
Okay. Judge Augustus Akins, for one, who's this seat is that we're running for. He has had a fabulous career. The work and the body of work that he's done has just been phenomenal, to the point that they're getting ready to rename the courthouse after him. So he is definitely a judge that I admire. County Court Judge Nina Ashanafi Richardson. To me, she embodies what a county court judge should be. She's active in the community. She's kind. She's generous. She listens. And she tries to find a resolution as best she can where the parties leave out there and they all feel half decent about the decision that she made. I mean, to me, she just embodies what a judicial temperament should look like. And there's so many others. Judge Jones, Judge Everett. There's so many judges here in Leon County that are active in the community and are doing things that I think really foster confidence in our system. So it's hard to name.
That's
one.
Perfectly okay. Mr. Churchill, same question.
Augustus Akins is a local legend, and we both have profound respect for him, obviously. Others on my list: Terry Lewis, Kevin Carroll, Jim Shelfer, George Reynolds, Harry Lee Anstead.
All right. Thank you very much. As a judge, you will represent the state, the motto of which is "In God We Trust," which is also in the state seal. I will ask you both, do you have a relationship with God or a higher power? Mr. Churchill.
I have a relationship with God in which I consider to be, for me and for everybody else I talk to, it seems part of the woven fabric into who I am. It's not something that would affect any ruling that I make on the bench, but it's something that's ingrained in in who I am as an individual.
All right, Ms. Riggans.
Absolutely. I'm an ordained pastor. So I definitely have a relationship with God. And, for me, that relationship embodies who I am. And it is one of the reasons why I feel that I can be fair and equitable and impartial. And I do think it plays a role in how we perceive things and, in the kindness that we show others. So I think that is a major part of who I am.
Okay, I will finish it up with one last question, which is, what is the single biggest thing that you have done to make Leon County a better place to live? Actually, we'll give this one to Ms. Riggans first.
I can't give you a single thing, but I can tell you that through all of the volunteer work that I have done, I think that I've made an impact in the lives of members of the community, from working with the homeless, from, feeding the homeless, from, reaching out and talking to veterans and helping them, through volunteer work. I've had the pleasure of serving as the former deputy county attorney, and the county is really pro volunteer work. We even have a volunteer department. And so we've done things like, Habitat for Humanity and things of that nature. So volunteering and helping leave a mark and leave the place that you call home a little better than where you found it is super important to me. And I strive to do that every time I leave my door. All
right, Mr. Churchill.
My 25-year marriage to my wife, Stacy, and our raising our 4 daughters, Allison, Megan, Paige, and Sassy, has been the greatest thing I have ever done or ever will be a part of doing. And doing that has also pulled me into other things in the community that I think have affected it well. I coached 5- and 6-year-old boys and girls soccer for the city of Tallahassee for 10 years in a row because my daughters originally told me they would play if I was the coach, and that started my coaching career. And then they aged out and I retired. But that has been one great thing that I've done, and it's been done through my family.
All right, thank you both. And now we will move on to closing arguments. This is an opportunity for each candidate to sum up their case in chief, if you will, of why they should become the next Leon County judge. Mr. Churchill, you answered the last question last, so you get to give your closing argument first, and I think we are going to let each candidate go on for a minute 30 on this one. So, Mr. Churchill, when you're ready.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for the forum again. I have been an attorney for 22 years. For the 18 of those years, I have run a business focused on representing consumers and small businesses here in Leon County. I have done pro bono work and been awarded the Pro Bono Legal Service Award by the Florida Bar President. I have been nominated to be a judge on this court or other courts like it by the Judicial Nominating Commission 4 times. It is my view that judges should listen more than they talk. And I have talked a lot today, and I'm still talking now. But to balance that out, I have been listening. I have been on a listening tour during this campaign. I have listened to and sat with the state attorney, the public defender, the chief of police, the sheriff, our primary opponent, Miss Sydney Brown, who got many, many votes in the primary. I have sat and talked with her, gathering perspective from hundreds of attorneys and thousands of citizen voters on what this court does well and what it can do better. And I want to hear from you, the voters of Leon County. What do we do well and what can we do better? If you believe that I can do that, I would love your vote on November 5th.
All right, thank you very much. And now, closing argument from Ms. Riggans.
Yes, thank you again for this opportunity, for the forum and the opportunity to address the voters. I've been practicing law for a little over 18 years, but my entire adult life I've been a public servant. I joined the United States Navy and served. I've been a life coach. I've worked as a victim advocate. I've worked in both criminal law and civil law. And it's always been with the goal to serve the public, to be a servant leader, to leave the community a little better than what I've found it. And during the course of running for this particular office, I've talked to more people than I can even think. I'm an introvert by personality, but an extrovert by necessity in running for office. And so I've attended forums dealing with, youth violence. I've attended forums dealing with, mental health issues. I've attended forums dealing with reformative justice. And, each time, the question is, what are we getting right and what are we getting wrong? What do you feel the judge's role is? How can, we help swing the pendulum and get the trust back in the community into the system that we have and operate, known as our justice system? And, a lot of times it's just that folks want to be heard, and that's what I'm here for.
Thank you very much to our candidates and to our audiences for joining us, joining the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee, WFSU, and the Tallahassee Democrat for this program. You can find a replay of this forum on our YouTube pages, tallahassee.com and WFSU.org. The recorded broadcast will be aired Tuesday, October 22nd at 11 a.m. Eastern on WFSU 88.9 FM, so tell your friends.
And remember, early voting for the general election begins October 21st and ends November 3rd. Election day takes place on November 5th.
And if you have questions for any of our upcoming forums, please email us at news@tallahassee.com. And you can look for our special election section of the Tallahassee Democrat. That'll have interviews with all of the candidates on the ballot, and that'll be available at Tallahassee.com. For all of us here, to all of you out there, thank you so very much for joining us today. Have a great day.